Finance Minister Tito Mboweni delivered that supplementary budget yesterday to help kickstart the economy. The minister says the projected total budget spending, including debt servicing costs, would exceed 2 trillion rand for the first time ever. Let's get you some reaction to that emergency budget. We're joined now by the president of the Black Business Council, Sandile Zungu. Sandile, good morning. Thanks very much for your time on the AM report. Some really shocking numbers there presented by the finance minister yesterday. He talked about the deficit widening from 6.8% to 14%. That's more than double. He talked about debt increasing from 65.5% to 81.8%. What's your reading just off the face of those shocking numbers on what the minister did yesterday?
Well, we are in trouble as an economy. I think everyone truly appreciates that by now. The numbers are not lying. They talk for themselves. The most important thing is then what do we do from here? Where do we go from here? There is a falling gross domestic product, which is predicted. It's not just a South African phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. It's largely caused by COVID. Yes, of course, we're in this terrible situation even before COVID. But there are some interesting things that the minister said yesterday, which possibly have received less attention, such as, for example, the recapitalization of the land bank, which I really liked. 3 billion rands going there. Is it enough? It's a step in the right direction. Now, if we are to have a primary agriculture-led revival, among others, including infrastructure, then clearly land bank has got to play a greater role than it has before. We need to diversify our economy further. Of course, there are investments in telecommunications that are supposed to happen, the auctioneering of the spectrum, among others, which are already happening. You know, the president had an infrastructure symposium just a day earlier. Those are all good things. Now, if we're to bring more people into agricultural sector, especially black people, young people, and women, then we have to have a properly capitalized land bank. I like that.
Yeah. Sandile, did the minister say enough about what kind of support government would be offering small businesses, particularly during the time of COVID-19? We know small businesses have been possibly the hardest hit.
I'm still to read the detail of the supplementary budget, but his speech was very lacking in terms of detail or even promise towards a small business. It was quite elaborate on support for the healthcare sector and the frontline response team, which we really appreciate because we're in the middle of a COVID crisis and we must not shy away from stating that fact. We have not even peaked. And it's very important to remind people all the time that we still have to flatten the curve on a sustainable basis. We still have to report a decline on daily infections. So him speaking to matters of COVID in this current situation was to be expected because this is a supplementary budget fostered to a large extent by the COVID crisis.
The other issue that I find quite interesting is the decision to give local government an additional 11 billion rand, 9 billion rand of that going towards water and sanitation. Now, we know from covering stories particularly relating to corruption and corruption that leads to a lack of service delivery, that this is a necessary decision but a worrying one. What are some of the checks and balances that surely must be put in place with that kind of additional spending?
Unfortunately or fortunately, local government is the most critical layer of government when it comes to service delivery. It is no wonder, therefore, that they've received a greater allocation of the supplementary budget. But at the same time, it's possibly the level where biggest corruption really happens. The lack of capacity of the state, it manifests itself at that local government level. Municipal managers and people in municipalities up to the task of really delivering services. History tells us they're not. And therefore, the propensity to waste that money, the propensity to even steal the money is greatest at local government. So the law enforcement agencies must do their work, and compliance with municipal laws in terms of MFPA, whatever it's called, need to be heightened. Yeah. Because we cannot afford to have another commission on how those monies were wasted or stolen.
And we know, as the Hardy-Dars wake up there outside your home, we know that corruption possibly, if we take a look at our SOEs, the extent of the state capture inquiry, it's that level of corruption that's stopping more foreign direct investment in South Africa. And we know we need that kind of investment if we're going to do something about our incredibly high unemployment numbers.
What was very interesting, I participated in this infrastructure summit or symposium. What is very interesting is that there is a desire by sovereign wealth funds to invest in South Africa. They are looking for these projects which are shovel-ready. Because they want to invest in South Africa. It shows that there is still confidence in this country from sovereign nations. We as South Africa must follow suit and believe in ourselves. The truth about infrastructure is that it attracts long-term investments, which has got much better interest terms than short-term debt, for example. So whilst we are attending to the issue of COVID, which is a short-term crisis we are faced with, we must at the same time continue to be focused on long-term investment, which, for example, the infrastructure symposium directed us towards, because that attracts a mix and a better form of investment from foreign countries.
The unemployment numbers, Sandile, I mean, pre-COVID, we were looking at upwards of 35% on the unofficial unemployment numbers, 29% only officially. What will those unemployment numbers look like in the months to come, and what are we going to do about it?
It is the single biggest threat to our social order, this unemployment, especially among young people. There is talk of as much as 50% unemployment once the dust is settled post-COVID. In the first quarter, we're talking about in excess of 30%, if we look at narrow form of unemployment. It's something that we as South Africans must be single-mindedly concerned about, because otherwise we are sitting on a powder keg. It's going to explode anytime. If you look at unemployed graduates, especially black graduates, who say, yeah, we've gone to tertiary, we no longer have social sciences as degrees, we now have engineering, but we're still unemployed. We have to worry about that ourselves as South Africans. So investments, for example, in infrastructure, which is not just going to be employing, an expanded national public works program kind of candidates, but also exploiting high tech in terms of renewables, high tech in terms of telecommunications infrastructure, need to be hastened, because therein lies the hope for employment.